Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Po, and today I'm doing week 36 of my 2020 reads. This week I read some really great books, including quite a few children's picture books. The first book I finished this week was We Need New Names by NoViolet Bulawayo. This is the last book that I was reading for my African author's monthly priority for August, and it was such a good book to end on because it was so strong. I absolutely loved it. I actually have done a standalone review, and so that is going to come up later this week, so keep an eye out for that if you want to know more. But I strongly recommend this book. It is just beautifully written. The prose is so gorgeous, and the voice of the narrator is really, really well done. It's told from the perspective of a young girl, a 10-year-old girl in Zimbabwe living in a lot of poverty, who ends up later on moving to the US to live with her aunt. And there's so much in here about culture, about immigration, and a lot of difficult topics are also kind of discussed, but in a way that's really very manageable because it's told from the perspective of this very innocent girl. I absolutely loved this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend it. The next book is the first one that I have read for my September priority month, which is Latinx Heritage, and that is the poetry collection Peluda by Melissa Lozada-Oliva. This is such a great poetry collection. I adored it, and I actually will have a standalone review for this up as well, but probably not until next week. But it is so good, you guys. I really, really love poetry that is about culture, about identity, that is feminist, and this checked all of those boxes. It just really did everything that I wanted it to do. I think that I heard about this poetry collection either from Yvette at BookCave, or maybe Priscilla at Bookie Charm, or maybe Adri at Perpetual Pages, but all of them have excellent taste in poetry. I'll link all of them below as well. So this is just one of those that I was expecting to like, but I loved it. I loved it so much. I thought that the emotions came through so strong. It was so funny. There was just such, especially an examination of kind of body image. You know, the title of this Peluda is Hairy One, and so it's like looking at things like body hair and what that says about our body and our kind of assimilation into mainstream culture. There's so much in here. I really loved it. So if you're interested, go ahead and check out my review, which will come up soon. I gave this collection 5 out of 5 stars. And I took a look. This is actually the only poetry collection that I have given 5 stars since I started recording my ratings on my own spreadsheet like 4 years ago. So even though I very much enjoy poetry collections, often I don't quite give them 5 stars, but this one was 5 stars for me, so I really recommend it. Next, moving into some children's picture books that I finished this week, and as a warning, you are going to see a lot of graphic works popping up on my weekly reads for the next few weeks because that is the mood that I'm in. I'm in the mood to read all things graphic, and I have checked out really a ridiculous number of them from the library, and they read so quickly, so just warning you ahead of time. But the first picture book that I read was one that was recommended by Laura at BookBubbler, so I will link her below, called The Little Blue Cottage by Kelly Jordan, illustrated by Jessica Courtney-Tickle. And this is like a sweet little story about a little blue cottage on the seaside that is a vacation home for a family, and the family that comes to visit every summer with a little girl, and the little girl in the house, you know, really have a connection, but it's about her growing up and how that connection changes. So it was sweet. I thought that the illustrations were very nice, but it didn't necessarily have a ton of depth for me. So even though I enjoyed it, I kind of think it's going to be pretty forgettable. So I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. The other 2 picture books that I read this week were both Latinx picture books that I'd heard about from Priscilla at Bookie Charm. She has a whole video recommending these, and I really recommend checking out her video. I will link it below. If you haven't been picking up very many picture books, you really should give it a try. There's actually some amazing ones out there. So the first picture book that I read was All the Way to Havana by Margarita Engle, illustrated by Mike Curato. This is a picture book that is meant for like very young children, and it's about a family that goes from their home in the countryside to visit relatives in the city. And if you didn't know, Cuba has a lot of these very old cars from like the 50s, and after all of the countries, because of the US, kind of stopped trade with Cuba, there weren't any new cars entering Cuba for decades and decades and decades, so people had to kind of keep working with their cars and doing a lot of upkeep on the engines, and so you have all of these very old cars that are still used. So this is about that trip and about this car, and it was super cute. It had really neat illustrations, and it's very much about also this kind of idea of connection to family and perseverance and ingenuity in making things work. So it had a lot of good things going for it. I think that it was maybe a little too simple for my taste, but I still enjoyed it quite a bit, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And the last picture book that I read was Dreamers by Yuyi Morales, which I adored. This was such a beautiful picture book. It is about a woman who immigrates to the US with her very young 4-month-old baby, and about kind of the difficulty in adapting to life in the US and finding her way, and then discovering the beauty of libraries and children's books. And it's just this sort of ode to the beauty of children's picture books and the kind of way that you can learn to follow your dreams and do all sorts of things. It was just really gorgeous, and the artwork is spectacular, especially because it is not just these drawings, but also a lot of the textures are pictures of other things, so like pictures of cloth or of materials, and it's just this really interesting art style that I thought was gorgeous. So it was moving, it was beautiful, and just very, very creative. So I definitely recommend this one. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so those are all of the books that I read this week. It was a very good reading week. I really loved the books that I read. If you have read any of these books, or you have any thoughts, any comments, any recommendations, anything at all, go ahead, leave me a comment below.